So, thank you for being our guest, Rosemary. And
thank you for asking me.
Yeah, let me introduce you to the audience and the audience to you, because our audience is not a typical audience. Those teachers that you'll see and meet here, they are those teachers, they want to change education from grassroots.
Brilliant.
Yes, and they are fighting to improve the quality of education from the base, starting from the real needs. And that's why our service meets their needs. We always ask them to, well, to send us and to contribute with their own ideas and perspective and needs to the service for free that we provide to them. So let me introduce you. I need to open your page because you worth really to be introduced properly, and one of the most incredible and well, interesting persons. Just a moment. I need to because I have so many pages open in this moment. And okay, so Rosemary, she is, I think, to Riccardo, friends of ours from Rome. I've met Rosemary, and she's one of the most proactive, incredible, co-constructivism woman and professor that we have the pleasure to meet. And she's really incredible because not only, and I will cut and copy in the chat her competencies, her studies and qualification. She is not only just a qualified speech pathologist, psychologist and teacher, not only just a former dean at the College of Teachers, not just, but also she's collaborating as director in Learning for Life Education with Kazakhstan Bio University. She's been ruling so many roles, indeed, and playing different roles in her life. That is amazing. But what is important, that you are a real fighter, Rosemary. And we like people fighting and going against the stream, the mainstream, especially during those days. I know that you are a woman devoted to study and getting to deeply research everything concerning robotics. We got here one of your books. Let me show it.
Ah, yes, the robots are here.
Yes, one of your books, and very interesting, and with the collaboration, of course, with our friends from Rome. Yes, and what is important is that you are a free mind, and as a free mind, you are always trying to see the things from a polyphonic perspective, not only one perspective. And this is quite important for us and for our teachers. Oh, Mariam. Hello, Mariam from region Castilla y León, Spain. And that's why we invited you here, because when I read your article, I said, this is really something that we need to be aware of. That's why my pleasure to introduce to our guest, and I hope you will enjoy it, that e-learning, not equality. It has a lot of meaning into it. So I give you the floor and the speech, and the audience is yours. Thank you, Rosemary. You can share your screen. Sorry, no screen. Screen.
You share my screen?
Yeah. I said share your screen.
Oh dear.
Okay. Everything is perfect. We see you and your slides.
Hang on, I can't see. Hang on, I'm trying to sort myself out. You can see me, can you?
Yeah, perfectly.
Oh, well, that's great. Well, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you for that amazing introduction, Stefano. I hope I can live up to all those things that you've said about me. Absolutely amazing. I think I do a lot to keep myself out of mischief. That's why I do a lot. You might wonder why I started off as a speech therapist. then and a psychologist, and then became a teacher. Well, it was a very personal reason. I had a boy called Luke. Ricardo will know him well. And he was very reluctant to go to school. Every time it was time to go to school, he would hide. And I was very distraught about this. At the time, my husband was working in Africa, so I had no support. I went into school, and the headmaster said, the trouble is, Mrs. Sage, is you have a very dull boy with very bright parents. And I was absolutely horrified because I knew Luke was quite bright. But he had problems. He had what was called otitis media. I don't know whether you have heard of that, but it's fluid in the middle ear. And what happens is you have intermittent hearing problems. So I guess that was one of his problems in school. Also, I knew that he did not work his left and right brain well together, like many children have that problem, because the brain grows until your teenage well, we think it even grows into the 30s and 40s now. So what we call slow learners may not be unintelligent children at all. They might be very bright. It's just their brains have not developed. Well, Luke was definitely one of these, because he'd pick up a pencil with one hand or the other hand, and I could tell from that very movement that his brain was not really activating properly for learning. Lots of children have these problems. In fact, we know now that children are coming to school with very high levels of cortisol. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but it's the stress hormone. And what that, and it's because mothers have very high levels of cortisol now, and because of our stressful society we live in, and they pass it through the placenta to their children, who come into the world with very high stress levels. Now, the consequence of this is slower hearing development. And that is of consequence when they come into school, because they're born into a very visual world of screens. The visual image is how they get meaning from what's around them. They come into school and they're suddenly faced with a lot of teacher talk. And putting the teacher talk and the visual images together is something that is quite problematic. So really, that's why I came into teaching, and I've never regretted it. I'm not sure that I have changed teaching very much in England, because I don't know, these sort of things are not really taken. We're very traditional here. We don't like new ideas too much. But I certainly have travelled a lot and done a lot of work in other countries. So it's lovely to think there's a very multicultural and multicultural audience here tonight. Well, let's get started, shall we? We're going to talk about e-learning, but not equality. And why not equality? The reason is because a lot of people find difficulty with processing information. And of course, when they go online, it's a very different way of processing information that they have previously been used to, particularly in school text contexts. So that's what we're going to focus on. Well, how are we going to do this? Well, I've got 15 slides, and they've got some tasks on the slides, which I hope that you'll be happy to go along with. And that's to help understanding. And we've got also a structure to the session. We're going to cover 4 main areas. We're going to cover brain roles. That's how our brains work. We're going to cover, secondly, sensory preferences. That's how our preference for taking in information. And then we're going to look, thirdly, at our organizing styles. And then fourthly, we're going to consider teacher roles. So those are the 4 things that we have to cover. Now, if I'm going too fast, you need to let me know, because I know I'm a fast talker. And
You're wonderful.
you
Perfect.
always say that, Stefano, but tell me if I'm too
No,
fast.
no.
I'm going on to the first slide now. I'm just going to make sure I've got it right. Hang on. Oh. Oh, I can't seem to.
I have no idea.
Oh, there it is. Slideshow from the beginning. Right. Oh, can you see it? Can everyone see it?
Yes, yes, great.
That's really what I've just said, and I'll just give you a minute or two just to look at the slide and make some sort of reflection on what you get from seeing that slide. Okay. Well, when I look at the slide, my reflection is what an amazing brain we have. You know, so many brain cells, so many connections. I mean, I can't even get my head around 1 trillion, let alone 500 trillions. And then to think that we're making 1 million connections every second, I just think is mind-boggling. So I don't know what you've taken from that slide, but I've taken from it that the brain is an amazing, amazing thing. Now, I'm going to tell you a story here, which kind of reveals like that you need real experience to understand. When I was learning psychology, our psychologist told us that our knowledge of the brain was just like the maps in the Vatican. Well, I had never seen the maps in the Vatican, so they meant nothing to me. But when I met up with Ricarda and we became friends and I went over to Rome, she took me to the Vatican and I was absolutely amazed at the maps because they were made in medieval times and they did not represent the world as we know it today. So I really realized then what this psychologist meant, that we know really very little about the brains, even in the 21st century. So it's a fantastic thing that's going on in our head. And as teachers, we have to wrestle with that, with children's brains that are so different. And with a multicultural society now that I mean, in schools that I've worked in, there have been 300 different languages spoken. I don't know what your experiences are, but just imagine trying to learn in a second, third, or fourth language, which is what a lot of our children are now having to do. But the brain is just an amazing thing. I'm going to go on to the next slide now because we're going to start with looking at brain roles in information processing. So here's the slide. It's blue at the moment, but things will happen on it. I'm sure you're aware of the fact, and I hope I'm not, we've got an expression in English. We say, teaching grandma to suck eggs. And that expression means, I hope I'm not teaching you things that you know. But even if I am, it's good to reflect on them because I'm always reflecting on things that I know and I see them in a different light because of a different experience or a different context. What we have is 2 brains, one on the left and one on the right. Now, the right is what we call our seeing brain, and it sees the whole of things. It sees the outline. It gets what we call in English the gist or overview of something. It's a hugely important part of our brain. And it develops first. It develops, its big growth period is from 4 to 7 years. And that's the seeing brain. But on our, got this wrong, but this is the title, brain roles. But secondly, we've got on the left our saying brain. And this is the brain that actually deals with parts of things, the details. And that doesn't start really growing well until a child is 7 years old. Now, this is the very strange thing about English education. As soon as a child goes into school at 4 or 5 years old, what do we start doing? We start giving them phonics. And really, I mean, as a speech therapist, that horrified me going into teaching, that children were doing phonics at such an early age, because for many children, being able to analyze things into parts is not something that comes easily. It's not until you're 7 plus. And of course, my son Luke was one of these children. He found it really difficult reading, really difficult. However, he's now he's PhD, and when he got his PhD, they said he was one of the leading scientists of his generation. So the fact that he couldn't really read till about 9, in fact, didn't mean that he wasn't bright. It was just his brain wasn't ready. So those are the two things that we need to take on board. The fact that the right brain is the most important brain in early learning, and it's the brain that puts information together. And I don't think it's odd that the fact that the 10 top countries in the world educationally don't start formal learning till 7. And that's the brain then is ready to take on putting together the left and the right brain easily. So it's a very, very good thing to start formal education after the left brain has developed. So that's the first thing we really need to grasp. And I'm going to show you what I like is a nice picture of the brain now, just to illustrate its different roles. And you will see the right brain is a lot freer. It's what we call the creative brain, whereas the left brain is much more structured, organized. It's the organizing part of the brain. It puts things into logical sequences. Both brains are both necessary for most tasks. And can you see the little bridge in the middle? That is called the corpus callosum. And that's where all those trillions, millions of connections are happening. And we know from brain studies that a lot of children don't get those connections established until their teens. My Luke was one of them. So the connection of the left and the right brain is often quite difficult in early years. So hopefully we will now understand what our brain roles are and we can go on. But we've got to know that the right brain is what gives us the outline of things, and the left brain is what helps us to deal with the detail. So how do we deal with this as teachers? Well, in order to enhance the right brain, we must always give an overview to something. And then the structure of what we're going to deliver. And then we need an opportunity afterwards to retell so that it commits to memory. And we'll go on to that part a little bit more in detail later. But the problem I found with e-learning, and I'm one who finds this a problem myself, it's delivered a lot faster and there's less time to process. I've just been on it was a big network of schools that we have in England, the Confederation Network of Schools, a 3-day conference. And the only lecture that I really got into well was one by, I don't know whether you've heard of Malala. She is the Pakistani girl who has really fought for female education. Have you heard of her? Well, she was badly injured, wasn't she, by the Taliban? She came over to England to I think be operated on for her injuries, and has stayed here. But her father is a teacher, and he was utterly inspiring. He didn't present any visuals, he just talked, and he was so passionate and he was so eloquent that you just were engaged the whole time with him. But I thought it was so much easier for me not having to deal with all these slides because they went too fast for me. So that's something I think that's a problem on e-learning, and people go too fast with their slides and their talk. I hope I'm not going too fast. Tell me if I am. Anyway, we're now going on to look to see how our two brains work. We're going to test them out. This is your first task, to test out your brains to see if they work together well. Now, this is the task. I'm going to give you a list of words, and the words are in different colours. What I want you to have, I expect some of you have seen this before, haven't you? It's good fun. People like this task. You've got to see the word, but say the colour. And if you say it aloud to yourself while you're doing it, it'll be a lot easier. So see it and say it. And I'll give you a minute or two to do the task before we discuss it. Okay? Now here is your list. And I'm going to give you time now to do the task. See the word and say the colour. I don't know if you've managed that. I've only just finished doing it because I got distracted by the cars going by in the road. It's a shame that we can't discuss that and everybody getting involved, because when I've done it with students, it's amazing. Some have found it easy and some have found it really difficult. And they are students, undergraduates or postgraduates. Um, we can't just assume that we are working our brains together well. And they need practice and help sometimes to do so. Now, on the materials I sent out before the lecture, there was on the workshop materials a system called um, the PACE system. Did you come across it? Well, I learned this system when I was doing a course at Harvard University on new communication technologies. And I thought, well, we do similar things in therapy with this, because lots of children who come to speech therapists are having problems putting their visual and verbal brains together. So these PACE exercises are really very good to help this. And one of them, we can try it now. If you um, if you raise your left knee and tap it with your right hand, and vice versa. You can't see me doing it, but you can. Uh, this is how you get your brains working together. If you do that about 25 times and you do it regularly every day, this really helps. Lots of things help brain togetherness. Playing the piano, swimming, lots of physical activities do help the coordination of the left and the right brain. And for children or adults who have difficulties with putting their brains together, certainly the pace activities work well. Now, I recently, my nephew, Bertie, is his birthday today. He's 8 today. Well, when he started school, he had real problems, just like Luke. And I gave the pace activities to his parents and to his teacher, and I explained why he was having his problems at school. You know, suddenly putting together the visual and the verbal was just too much. And he's now doing really well at school, and I certainly think that doing these exercises have really helped him. So if you find you have students who have problems with putting together what they see and what they hear, try the pace techniques, and they are in the stuff that has already been sent out to you. But that's just a little test to see how your brains work. And it's quite difficult, isn't it? I find it quite difficult. I've done it loads of times, but I still find it difficult. It's not easy using both our brains. Right. So we've tested out our brains. Now what we're going to do is test out our organizing styles. So we're going on to the next slide, and we're going to look at our organizing styles. Now, there are basically two types of ways that we organize information, and there again they reflect our left and right brains. Now, the right brain, that's the one that does the overviewing, gets the gist of things, that it works with the left brain in order to organize. So the right brain works on the outline and the left on the detail. And we're going to try this with Miller's puzzle. Some of you may know Miller's puzzle well, but we're going to try it. I'm going to give you this puzzle, and it's just really lots of shapes. I'm going to ask you to try and work out what you think the image means. And then when I've given you a bit of time to do that, we'll talk about, well, how did you do it? Did you look for outlines first, or did you look for details? Because that will show how you are organizing. So let's have a look at Miller's puzzle, shall we? Can you see that, everybody? Can you see it okay? Now I'm just going to give you a bit of time to work out what you think that image is. Now, I don't know if any of you have discovered what the image is, but the image actually is a cowboy on a horse. Have you been able to decipher that? Now, I'm a bottom up person and I look for details first. So the sort of thing that brought together my resolution of the image was I looked in the middle of the picture at the top, and there is what looks to be a cowboy hat. And then I look to the left, and there's a shape that looks rather like the horse's head. And if you look to the right, middle down the picture, there's a tail that looks like a tail. And then further down, you can see 4 legs. Now, can you see that? Now, some of you may find that really difficult to do. I've had students who've never been able to work out that that was a cowboy on a horse, because it's really difficult. You've got to look at the detail and work out what it might be by putting the details together. Or you might just be looking for outlines of things and see, oh, there's an outline of a horse, or there's an outline of a man. Now, looking at this puzzle was, well, it was like a light bulb when I saw all this work. It's by Miller, who is a speech therapist, psychologist, and teacher like me. I think she originally came from Canada, but has been largely working in the United States. But she said the important thing for teachers is that we teach according to our organizing style. And this came over to me very much in my first job, where I taught speech therapists at London University. And we had someone called Jonathan Miller. I don't know whether you've heard of him, but he's quite a famous neurologist who's gone into the arts world. And he does a lot of creative work. And he used to come and talk to the masters and doctoral students about his life's journey, really. And he'd come into the theatre, sit on the stage, and then just start talking. And at the end of the lecture, every time you heard people coming out saying, well, I didn't understand a word he was saying. And then others saying, I thought he was marvellous, because he was very much a bottom-up presenter. He just never gave an outline of what he was going to say at all, or worked out the structure of his presentation. He didn't mention it. He just got on with his story. Now, that was very much a light bulb moment for me, because I'm a bottom-up person. I find it really difficult to structure anything out. It's like if I write an article or I write a book, I just get all my ideas down on the paper and then sort them out. Now, some people like to do mind maps and all sorts of notes, don't they? I can't do that. It doesn't work for me. And that's because of my organising style. Now, I think the interesting thing about Miller's work is that they found in their research, the group of them, that teachers teach to their organising style, and that half of us have a top-down preferred style and half of us have a bottom-up preferred style. And their studies showed that children or students always did better with the organising style of their teacher if theirs was the same. And that has always stood in my mind, that half of people listening to me will find me really difficult to understand. But how do we deal with that? Well, always give an overview of what you're going to say, and for the bottom uppers, as I call them, they need stories. They need plenty of examples, of real examples, in order to grasp. So it's very interesting work, and it's all in this book, very old now, Language Intervention and Academic Success. And if people want all these references, I can supply them. But that's our organising style. So, well, once we've got this sorted out, how our brains work, we need then to go on to looking, well, what sense processing is particularly important for us. So the next slide is all about that. We're going to do another task, and I'll get the slide up. So it's what's happening?
I have no idea.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. It's coming. Okay.
Ah, yeah. Now, here's a picture, and I'm going to ask you what you see. Some of you must have come across this before, I'm sure, because if you've done psychology, this is a typical thing that they give you in a psychology lecture. But it's a picture. And what do you see? Do you see the old woman immediately, or do you see the young woman? It's an ambiguous picture, isn't it? Now, some people find it very difficult to see anything, or even see the young one or the old. So I'll try and pick it out for you. Now, if you look at the middle of the picture, and if you're looking at the old woman, you will see that the ears of the young woman make the eyes of the old woman. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? And the nose of the old woman is the chin of the young woman. And the mouth of the old woman is the neckband of the young woman. So it's what you focus on, isn't it? It's the details that you focus on give you your interpretation of the picture. And it depends on which cells in your retina are picking up the image and transmitting them to your brain. And we've got loads of different cells that pick up the colours, the contrast, the foreground, the background. And some deal with central vision and some deal with peripheral. Now, the important thing is that images are interpreted very differently by people, and we have to beware. Now, this came over to me working in Japan. I don't know whether any of you have worked in Japanese schools. They are amazing. But if you've worked in Japanese schools, you will have come across the custom called hansai, which means reflection. And a third of every lesson is reflection. And every child has to get up and in 30 seconds say what the lesson meant to them. Now you get so many different interpretations of the lesson. It's amazing. What the teacher has said has been taken very differently by each child or each student. But when you think about it, it's the most amazing learning experience because children or students learn many different perspectives on things from sharing them with each other. And certainly when I went to Japan, I remembered in doing this in psychology and thinking, yeah, we all take something different from what we see and what we hear. So some people find it even difficult to switch between the old woman and the young women. Don't worry if you find it difficult. So I remember having one psychology student who was in tears because she couldn't see it. You know, this is normal. We all have very different kind of experiences when we look at things, and there isn't a normal, is what I'm saying, really. Right, so we've looked at visual processing. Let's look at auditory. Now, you need to close your eyes for this one because I'm going to ask you to think of a white flower on a dark background. A white flower on a dark background. And if you close your eyes, it's so much easier to do it. And then I'll tell you what I've thought about and we'll discuss it. I don't know whether you've managed to think about a white flower on a dark background, but I immediately thought about a picture that's upstairs in my house of my mother's wedding. And it's a black and white photo. And in the middle of it is a bouquet of white lilies. And that was the image I got when I was asking myself to think of a white flower on a dark background. And you may well question this, because it says a white flower, and I was thinking of many white flowers. So isn't this strange about words? You know, they don't automatically process in the way that you might intend, because I intended one white flower, but I, in fact, saw a bouquet. Now, when I've done with this students, you see some students have come up with a group or of snowdrops that they've seen in their garden in the dark earth. Lots of people come up with images like a spray of white flowers on a coffin. So the words mean so much differently to it. They mean so many different images to us, that there again, words are very ambiguous. I think an important thing to think about is, as well, we have a 3-minute attention span for speech. That a lot of studies show that after 3 minutes we become very distracted if the task isn't, if the words go on and on forever without some sort of stopping activity. We can become distracted by all sorts of things. I guess it's time for some of you to eat. Therefore, you might be thinking about what you're going to eat, or something might have happened in the day to take your mind off what we're doing now, because our attention span for speech is quite poor, really. So we always have to think about breaking up talk with tasks. And remember the overview, the topic structure and review, and that personal stories will engage our interest. So we found that visual images are not the same for us all, or words are not the same for us all. So these are things as teachers we have to really seriously think about. Now, the last one we're going to look at is processing movement, touch, and position in space. And it's one of the things that is important about that is body language, isn't it? That accompanies what we do. We often make lots of gestures, movements with our faces, with our hands, our arms, our legs, whatever. How well can we read body language? Here's a picture of a man, and he's got his hands together under his chin, hasn't he? Now, I've put 3 different interpretations of that. One is, I can handle this easily. Does it mean that? Let me think about this for a while. That's number 2. And the third one is, that will never work. Now, of course, we can't discuss this, but I guess if we could, some of you would say 1, it means 1 for you. Some would say 2, and some would say 3. It always works that way in groups that I've done this activity with. They all take the gesture differently, because gestures mean different things to different people. I remember we do a thumbs up sign a lot in England, and it's a good sign. It's, oh, that's good, that's great, lovely to see you, that's nice. Now, when Luke, my son, was traveling the world on his gap year, he did that to someone and got really, and they pulled him to the ground because it was a rude sign, and you never ever do that to people. It means a very confrontational sign. So you see, body language means quite different things depending on where you are in the world and how it concurs with your particular language and culture. So these are all the things that we have to wrestle with, aren't we? That we all will interpret what we see, what we hear, and what we experience really in a different way. Right, so I don't know how you're getting on listening to me, but what's the time?
It's lovely. No
Oh, are
problem.
you all exhausted?
Really.
Hmm?
Okay.
You're okay,
Okay.
are you?
Slow down. Let's ask to if any participant has a question.
Hmm?
And let's ask to the participant to make some questions if they want to
Do
ask
they
you.
want to question this before we go on? Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Does anyone want
Just
to
yeah,
make
stop sharing the screen for a while.
Hmm?
Stop sharing the screen for a while.
Stop share?
Screen.
Yeah.
Let's see all the participants and see, just to give you some relief.
Does anyone want to make a comment or?
Well, I'm sure Laura, Bettina, something, no. Well, I think it's quite interesting how the brain works. We are working a lot on these topics, but still, it's very difficult for us that we are researching indeed in the field, really to be totally aware on which kind of impact has our example, our movement, our voice, our activities with children can have on their brain. That's quite interesting. And it would be nice to have a kind of tool able to show immediately what's happening in the brain whenever we use a certain tone of voice, speaking like that, or just singing, or just playing, or just doing some activities with children. That would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. It
No.
is. It's such a big subject, and it's mind blowing because you think the more you think about it, the more you think, well, how on earth can I teach these children successfully?
Yeah.
Because every one of them is different.
It goes
But
directly
in a sense,
into,
e-learning has some advantage because you can start to personalize learning a lot more.
yeah, and also some disadvantages as well.
Of course, yeah, it has disadvantages. I mean, its big disadvantage is that when we're talking about what the movement sense, the kinesthetic, or I call it haptic. Haptic, of course, means to hold. It's a Greek word. It means to lay hold on. The whole. It's the context actually. Sense that we have that is totally removed in e-learning. So
And also
and
the proximal learning environment is disappearing.
yeah,
Collaboration, cooperative learning, peer
exactly.
education, emotion, educational emotions.
Yeah, the support of all your friends that give you motivation. Yeah,
Example,
that's all gone.
affectivity. I mean, positive emotion, they influence each other. That's quite interesting topic.
Yeah.
We're actually working on that in a European project called Pearl. We're experimenting, and we've been experimenting. We are piloting now from 0-6 years old, the importance of education and motion in group activities.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, all these things are happening.
Mariam, she is quite an expert. Mariam Blanco, we have here.
Hello, I'm sorry, I arrived late, 5 minutes late in the beginning, but I follow all the speech and I very much agree on everything. And I like it very much when you highlighted for the teachers, be aware we don't see the same thing in the same way all the time. And we need time also, space and time for understanding.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very conscious, having worked in Leicester for a lot of my life, the most multicultural city in Europe, they say. I mean, the immigrant population dominates totally. More awareness of these things makes you teach better. You don't take anything for granted. And that's important. We'll perhaps shift on, shall we? Because the next slide brings a lot of this together.
Great, lovely.
In a
Go on.
different direction. So
if anyone, any question,
we can have more questions at the end.
Yeah, or you can write your question. I will quote them.
Question. Yeah.
In the chat.
Yeah, be good.
Because some teachers, they are a little bit shy to show they don't speak really a proper English, or they have some problem to express themselves in English.
Exactly.
And that's the main problem. And your accent is very, very British. The most British we ever had here. You know.
Honestly.
Yeah. Am I right, Laura? She's.
I don't know what you mean by British, but I speak standard language, and of course,
very standard language.
I know a lot of people are across the world to talk American English and not standard English. I'm aware of that. I'm working a lot in Europe, so
there's so many English languages.
And that's bad in a way, isn't it? If we all speak.
I have no idea. I'm not British. I'm not English, just Italian.
Yeah.
But Laura, she's an English teacher in a secondary school, and she knows more than me.
I love to hear you speak, Rosemary, Professor Sage. That is, what you say is really interesting, but also the way you say it is wonderful. So it's lovely to hear you speak.
Oh, thank you. But I speak what I call standard English. Now, this is the funny thing about England. We don't teach standard English in schools now because we say it's elitist. And it's ridiculous because there has to be a language that everybody understands, because we have so many dialects. When I went to university in Leicester, there were a lot of northern people there, and I did not understand them at all. Their accents were so strange, and the words they used to talk about going on the gas. Well, what the gas is something that you cook by in my book, but for them it meant the pavement. The words, as well as the way they said it, were so different. So that if you can't have a standard English, how do you cope? Most languages do have a standard and then the dialect, but I don't know. We're a very strange race, in fact, the English. Anyway, I'm glad that you're coping. We're going to now just share the screen again. Oh, hang on. No, I want.
It's coming. Yep. You're just starting from the first one.
I don't want the first one. Hang on. Oh, hang on. I think it's number 8.
Yeah. It's coming.
Oh, that's the one I want.
Now, slideshow and start from the 8th. Up, 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 up. Slideshow.
Yeah.
But your mouse is not moving.
No, it's not moving.
I have no idea.
Hang on.
Now it's moving.
Is it moving?
Yeah, go on slideshow now. No, okay. Your computer is crazy.
It's kind of freezing up and it's not. Oh, hang on. I've got it now.
Okay.
Slideshow.
Yeah. And now you see from current slide. Yeah. Oh, lost.
Oh,
Yeah, the second. Okay, that one.
Oh, this is always the problem with me.
You
using
missed it.
technology.
Not yet.
Right. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, but it isn't the presentation. It's just, you should slideshow again and current slide. Do it again.
I'll do it.
If you,
Oh, I'm glad I've got
the second, not the first one. The second. No.
Oh, hang on.
Okay, it's over.
On the current side, isn't it?
Yeah, that one. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay, let's go on like that.
Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. Don't worry.
You can see at the top, how do you process, represent, and organize information? That's what we've been about. And I love this Chinese proverb. I'm sure you know it. We hear, we forget. We see, we remember. We do, we understand. And I'm always very shocked when I read the research to show that most of what we hear, we forget. We perhaps only absorb or remember about 8% of it. And that seems to me to be quite a frightening statistic, that we talk a lot, but that it's not taken in. But if we actually put people into a task, they will remember that task much more than they will hear us talking about it. So I think that's quite important. It's also an interesting thing that we do have preferences for either for visual things, verbal, or haptic things. And they're fairly equally distributed, but the haptic sense, is there a problem? Can you hear?
Yes, perfectly. Someone is always turning on the microphone and without being realizing.
Okay.
Okay. So.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that more people have a preference for the haptic sense, and this, I've done a lot of research on information processing of this type, and I was asked to look at children who learnt well vis-a-vis children who learnt badly. And one of the things you find with children who learn well is that they use all their sight, sound, and haptic senses equally, and they're equally strong. Whereas children who learn badly, their worst sense is their verbal. It absolutely worst. Sight is slightly better, but their strongest sense is their haptic sense. So the message there is that if people are learning poorly, they must be put in very active learning situations. I'm sure there's some people here who work in forest schools. I mean, I've worked in forest schools in Latvia, and they're amazing because they are all active. It's all active learning. And these are just the sort of circumstances that children or students who have learning problems, they need to have active learning, because that is, research shows, their strongest sense. And you see that, and it's our basic sense. It's the one that's less or less liable to be damaged in anything. It's the most intact sense. And of course, if you look at a baby, what do they start doing to learn about the world? They start putting everything in their mouth, because our mouth is our most sensitive part of our body. So they are learning through the haptic sense all the time as young babies. But in England, I'm afraid, most of our learning is visual and verbal. We do not do too much getting children to get into tasks, well, other than homework. And that's why in employer reports in England, they say that employees have a lot of knowledge, but they can't apply it because they haven't been taught to apply it in their system. I mean, we have more tests than any other country in the world. I think we have 127 public tests. So all the learning really is directed, or most of the learning is directed to passing tests or preparing for tests. This isn't teachers' fault, it's the fault of our system, but it means that a lot of our children miss out on applying knowledge. Another thing to remember that research tells us we only give 20% of anything we do full attention. That is quite worrying for us teachers, isn't it? That most of the time they're not attending to us for all sorts of various reasons. And then I think the impact of message, this is research that also was a light bulb to me. Words mean very little. It's the voice that you use and the gestures, movement, context that you provide in learning that has the most impression. So it has the most impact. So of course, when you think about e-learning, we miss out largely on the non-verbal support that is needed to interpret a message. And that's why, I mean, some of the American studies on e-learning are very worrying because Can you hear me? I can hear a lot of laughter, which is good.
Well, that was the same lady that turned on the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Is she okay now?
Well, I mute her. So she's very okay.
She's okay?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to listen to a story. We're going to listen to a story because we're going to look at how we assemble. Oh, what's happening there? We're going back rather than forwards. Here we are. Right. Now, we're going to look more carefully at about how we assemble information. Now, we've looked at how it comes to us through eyes, ears, and our haptic sense. But also to assemble information, we need a lot more. We need to imagine, we need to make links, we need to make assumptions. And of course, we have to visualize to understand. Now, some of you will have come across this places trick before. It's something that the Greeks used to do a lot of. And it's a very interesting trick. Now, first, I'm going to ask you to do an imaginary walk in your house, or you might live in a flat. You might find it easier to shut your eyes while you're doing this to help, but I want you to imagine opening your front door, walking into the hallway, and then going into your kitchen. And if you're in a house, climbing your stairs. If you're in a flat, going across the or moving across the corridor, walking along the corridor to enter your bathroom. So find your bathroom and then wander into your bedroom. So the trip takes you to opening your front door, walking into the hall, going into your kitchen, either climbing your stairs or walking along the corridor to your bathroom, and then wandering into your bedroom. Okay, have you got those areas of where you live in your mind. Now I'm going to tell you a story, okay? And the story begins, you've been out, you've had a fantastic, lovely meal with your friends. The wine has flowed. The food was absolutely delicious. You finished your meal and now you're staggering home and you reach your front door. How odd! It was shut and locked when you left. Now it's open. There's a large red apple, the size of a football, and it's propping the door open. How strange. You walk inside, and what do you see? There's a shiny silver slipper glinting in the light, and it's in the middle of your hallway. It looks rather like the one that Cinderella, if you know the story, wore to the ball when she met the prince. It's certainly not your slipper. Well, you're feeling a little bit strange at this time, so you wander into your kitchen for a glass of water, and there on your work surfaces, there's a bright blue pen, and he's doing an Italian tarantella dance, a little jig on the worktop. How amazing! Your mind is in a whirl. You rush to the bathroom and you trip over a large green stone. It's an emerald, the size of a large loaf of bread. It winks at you as you pass by. It must be worth an awful lot of money, that size. This is strange. Life is getting stranger and stranger. You're nearing the bathroom and you can smell bath oil. You open the door and you find a large wooden spoon splashing in the bath water. It turns and smiles at you. And you know now you've had too much red wine. Stumbling into the bedroom, on the bed is a big black velvet cushion, and in the middle of the bed is a silver necklace curled like a snake. You collapse on the bed at this stage and you fall into a very deep sleep. Now, I don't want you to fall into a deep sleep, but I'm going to just give you a minute to see if you can recall the 6 items that were in that story, okay? So some of you might want to write it down, some of you might want to think in your head, but I'll just give you a minute to think of the 6 items, and we're going to think about, well, how did we remember them? Have you had a chance to recall them? Now, the 6 items were the apple, at the front door, the slipper in the hallway, the pen in the kitchen on the worktop, the stone somewhere in the passage that you had to leap over, spoon that was in the bath, and the necklace that was on the bed in the bedroom. Now, this is an important thing, isn't it? Because we only remember if they are links that we can make in our already established memory. That I gave you place where you live, because I know you all live in a place and you all probably had a door, a hall, a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, etc. So those I knew would be proper links for you. But it's very important when there's new knowledge to put in that there are these links, isn't there? And also that they're familiar to you, these links, and we use them to put what we have new coming into us, into our memories. And now the Greeks were absolutely amazing at doing this, weren't they? They called it mnemonics. I've written a whole book about it. It's called Lend Us Your Ears, but it's really looking at all the tricks that teachers can use to help children memorize and learn things. And in our culture, that's very important because we have so many exams. Kids have to have good memories. And it seems to be that in our education system, a good memory is all you need to get down the facts for your exam. But you will only have a good memory if you can provide good links. And although we haven't really time to go into it, but I've got a book, Lend Us Your Ears. It's here. I think you could get it for €3 on Amazon, students tell me, because it's really old. Old books don't cost anything, do they? But it's full of ideas about how you help children form memories, because we find it difficult to listen, and we find it difficult to look. And we need to find the links that make that a better activity for us. So the places trick is a very old trick that the Greeks used to use, and it's amazing. It's still useful today. So that's how we assemble information. We make lots of links. We have to do lots of imagination and make assumptions too. And we're going to look at that a little bit more in the next slide. Now, I don't know whether you're familiar with this little poem, Elgie met the bear met Elgie, it was bulgy, the bulge was Elgie. Do you know that? Do any of you know it? This is very English. I guess every English child, when they go to nursery, learns this. Certainly I did when I was a child. Now, that's a very interesting thing because it's a story poem. It tells a story. There's characters and there's actions and reactions. So it's a full story in 4 lines, but there's important information that's missing. Do you know what it is? Well, what's missing is the bear ate Elgie. That isn't told, is it? We have to infer that. How do we infer it? It was because the bear was bulgy. Now, of course, we have to know what bulgy means. A lot of children don't, mind you. Bulgy means very big and fat. So we have to infer that after that meeting, the bear ate Elgie. Now, we have to make an assumption there that bears eat things, living things. We don't know whether Elgie was a person or boy or another animal, do we? We have to make that inference. In fact, in the children's books, it's always a little boy. Never a little girl, but always a little boy. But Elgie is a name that, well, you wouldn't automatically think of as a human person's name. You probably more likely think of it as the name of a dog or a cat or something, wouldn't you? But in fact, in the picture books, it's always a little boy. Also, the word it, the bear met Elgie, it was bulgy. Now you've got to make a reference there. That word it refers to the bear, not LG, does it? So when we're making meaning of information, we're filling in all the time. If it's a sequence of words, we're filling in information and opinion gaps. And I can tell you that a lot of children have problems, and a lot of students do. I mean, I've been called into schools many times to see students 15 and on. I give them that poem and they can never tell me what information is missing. They can't tell me who it is. A lot of children go through the system without having that ability to fill information and opinion gaps. Even in universities, students have trouble. When I went to Liverpool University, I could not believe this. I gave the students a report to read, and they emailed me the next day. Several of them emailed me, said, did I realise it was a 7-page report and they could only ever manage 1 page? And I thought, this is amazing. And they found it really difficult to get the main messages out of this report. And I thought, well, they're not very good on these information and opinion gaps, are they? Even at that stage of their careers, you know, these provide difficulties. I'm just going to show you some information at the bottom. I hope you can see it, but this is research I've done. I've looked at children entering school, the same school, over 3 years, just to look at the pattern. And every single child was at least 2 years below in their cognition and their language. So at age 5, they were functioning in thinking and language as a 3-year-old. Now, this was a school that was it wasn't one of the worst schools in Leicester. It was a school near the university, so there were lots of middle class and professional people's children there, as well as it was a good mixture school. Now, I looked at the senior school that these children went on to at aged 11, and we found that one of my PhD students was one of the staff there. It was a school that was constantly in trouble for not reaching standards. And I got called in to look at this. And I said, well, have you looked at what your children bring into school in terms of their thinking and their language to cope? And we found 80% of the children were actually at a 5 to 6 year level, and they were aged 12. So really, all through primary, their thinking and language hadn't really developed to the way it should have done to cope with senior school. I know when I was a speech therapist, we used to have a number of German students on Erasmus scholarships and French. And the German students used to tell us that children were always tested for their language ability on entering school. And I thought, well, that's a very good thing to do. And it is very easy. There are very easy tests that you can use, like a story retelling test is what I use, to get the idea of how a child can cognitively and linguistically retell something. But it is an amazing thing that in our reports that employers write, they say thinking and communication are the weakest abilities in employees. Now, do you think that's amazing? I think it is, when you think they've been through all those years of school, but we haven't really taught them to think and communicate very adequately for the workplace. And there's certainly lots of research to show, and these are the sort of problems that these people seem to be having.
Ами, вземи нещо за салата, там домати, краставици или нещо. Ако искаш пък зеле, чакай само да не се включа.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't pick that up.
No, don't worry. It was a teacher, the same as before, and I removed from the group now. I'm sorry, because she is really, okay, she must be aware not to disturb.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, continue, sorry.
Okay. We're coming to the end, you'll be glad to know. Now, we've talked a lot about the problems that we have with processing and visual and auditory processing, haptic processing. We've talked a lot about that, and how in school, when they've got to put all the visual and the auditory and haptic information together, a lot of children have problems which, if you're a speech therapist, you call higher level language problems. If you're a teacher, you might call them dyslexia or attention deficit syndrome. If you look at the literature, there are so many labels for children who have difficulties. It's amazing. I worked on the Child Development Centre diagnostic team once, and it was amazing that we saw these children. Largely they were sent to us because they had problems in schools and they weren't learning, so they came to this interdisciplinary team. But all members of the team had different labels from them according to their particular professional experience. I found that quite illuminating. So okay, we have children in school who learn well, and we have children who don't. All the children who don't, I would suggest, always have higher level language problems. I looked over 10 years, the children who came to our Child Development Centre for behaviour problems, for bad behaviour in school, totally disruptive children. They all had problems with language, the sort of thing that we were talking about, in making inferences, dealing with opinion gaps in information. Now, these are quite subtle problems, not always easy to detect unless you see a child individually. And of course, teachers have got large numbers of children, haven't they? They can't individually look at children in detail, but you can bet your bottom dollar that if children are badly behaved in school, there's a reason for it, and often they have a processing problem. And certainly that is definitely my experience. If you look at the literature, it will support that. So this is the question: how do you build up that processing ability? And one of the things that my research has been directed at is to finding a way to do that is foolproof, if you like. When I first researched it, I saw that what we're talking about is big, connected, large chunks of talk, say, that you find happening in schools, lecture halls, everything. People are talking a lot. And that's called what we call narrative talk or narrative structure. And there are different levels to this. And if you look at the slide in the middle, you see that these 7 levels are identified. Now, the first level is generating ideas. And the sort of thing I would do is give a child or a student an object like a cup, say, and say, tell me about it. Now, in the Child Development Centre, we would expect children to be able to give the same number of ideas as their age. So if they were 6, we'd expect them to say 6 things about the cup. And if they didn't, we would start to be worried about it. I mean, someone my age, you think, would be able to give very many. And of course you do. I mean, in psychology courses, we used to do that. I used to hand a cup around. And I think we got fed up once. We'd said 300 things about this cup. people get very inventive when they've said the normal things about the shape, the colour, the size, what it's made of. They say, oh, we'll use it for a hat. So they get very inventive about it. But the first level is generating ideas. And when I get called into schools, not so much now, because I'm retired, but when I was working, I was constantly called into schools for children who weren't learning. And the first thing I did was see how they could generate ideas, and none of them could. You can bet your bottom dollar that children who are poor learners are poor at generating ideas. So that's the first level to work at, and we'll look at how you do that in a moment. But then the second level is arranging ideas. You find with the cup, if they start to arrange them, they'll say something about all the colours first. You can't see my cup, but it's got loads of colours on it. Or you see them start to group things. So generating ideas and then starting to arrange them in a way. And then the next level is comparing ideas. So they might say, oh, this is my cup that I have at breakfast, but I have another cup that I use for my nighttime drink. So they start to compare or use some comparisons in their talk. And then sequence ideas in time, like a set of instructions. Now, when I became a teacher, I looked at how teachers gave instructions, and I found even in the primary school, because I'm a teacher who's was trained to teach in primary, secondary, further education and higher, because I got a psychology degree. You were enabled to do that course. So I started off on primary, and I found a teacher never gave less than 3 directions at a time. Never. I found it in my school. So they'd say, open your books, find page 2, and look at the picture at the top. 3 instructions. And so, you know, we're expecting children to be at that level when they operate in a primary school class. They must be able to deal with instructions, but many of them can't. So because they can't even start at the first level of generating ideas. So this is a very useful way of looking at how you develop narrative. And then of course you go on, so the next level will be they'd be able to introduce something, describe it, and then discuss it. So they might discuss the cup after describing it and saying, well, I like this cup. I've had it a long time and I like it because it's very chunky, and when I throw it around it doesn't break. So they're discussing it or giving a view. That's the next level. And then you've got the report level, like if you went to a match or you went on a holiday, you could retell it. You could give an introduction. You could describe what happened. You could discuss it and then give a reflection. Like if you went to a football match, you might say it was a good match or a poor match. So at that level, you'd start a personal reflection. And of course, the last level is what I call the story level, is where you can set the context, you can describe the characters, what they do, their actions, the results, and then the reactions. Now, American research shows that a number of children leave education without the last 3 levels. So that is quite a disturbing fact, that they haven't learned how to develop their ideas in a structured way. And of course, there are other things that are about the communication of ideas, isn't it? The content has to be right for the audience. It hasn't got to be too difficult or too easy. It's got to be at the right level. And the convention, you've got to have the right rules to get the message over. And conduct, you've got to make the right impression on others. I'll always remember when I was a psychology student, we had a very special psychologist come to lecture us. He was 1/4 of an hour late. He turned up, it was a hot summer day, shorts, a t-shirt and flip-flops, so he looked dressed for the beach. He started talking, he was very monotonous, and within 10 minutes the lecture hall had almost emptied. It wasn't what people were expecting. And therefore, you know, his conduct wasn't really relevant for the audience. And it's a very clear example of how that was quite an important factor. And of course, the ideas have got to be clear. And before they can deal with narratives, of course, children and all of us have to be able to deal with conversation. We've got to be able to follow it, ask questions, answer questions, contribute ideas, and show our behavior, like eye contact, smiling and head nodding, to keep the conversation going. And that has to be checked on. All speech therapists will look at that behavior before they see how people coming to them with language problems, they will look at how they operate in dialogue or conversation first. So these are all very important things if we're trying to think about how to make the message appropriate for those listening to us. And the next slide shows how we do it. We're nearly at the end now. You'll be really pleased to know. But this is, I'm just showing you, I worked in Japan on a project. It was a project between England and Japan to develop the citizen for the 21st century. It was a wonderful project, lasted several years with lots of trips to Japan and the Japanese teams coming over here. But this is a school I worked at where children do all the teaching, would you believe? No teachers teach. It's always the children who do the teaching. Can you believe that? This is a 7-year-old child and he's taking a science class. There's 60 in this class. Normally there's only 40, but there were 60 because another class had to join them because a teacher was absent, and the class was divided up. So he had an extra 20 that day. And he had chosen to teach them science, and they were looking at little experiments to decide the effect of one substance on another. And you can see on the board the 8 experiments and the results, because he divided the class, the 60 into the class, into 10 groups of 6. And at this point in the lesson, they were all it was the Hansai. They were all telling back their results, and his assistant was writing them on the board. Now, in this school, children teach twice a month in a class. They teach twice a month, and they can teach anything they like. And they have to get the lesson together by asking lots of people. The teacher doesn't help them. They have to go and find their own help. And it's absolutely amazing. But this is how the Japanese teach narrative thinking and narrative structure. And I can tell you that on all the tests that we did, at every level, the Japanese children were 4 years ahead of the British ones. And why? Because in early years at this stage, they put all the emphasis on communication and relationships. They're not bothered about the knowledge, history, geography. Well, they do have maths, languages and science taught in groups, and teachers lead these. But then they're not curriculum bound like we did. I mean, their curriculum policy was as thin as they come. whereas ours are bookshelves full of curriculum policy. It was a very, very different approach to teaching. Well, you know, it completely flipped me over, really. I realized, well, there are so many different ways to teach. It's what's appropriate, I suppose, for the systems that you live in. But I loved working in Japan because everyone's equal. I loved it. Hansai, where you all get together and discuss, happens at the beginning of the day. All the staff get together, everybody, cleaners, security staff, teachers, everybody gets together and talks about the day. And then at the end, everyone comes together and talks about how the day has gone. And you arrive in school in the morning, and what happens? The children are in the garden, tending the garden, they're sweeping the floors, cleaning out the toilets. The children do look after their school. The meals are cooked for them at lunchtime, but they do all the serving out. They do all the tasks to care for their school within their school day. They don't have adults to do it for them. And they are so resourceful. My daughter, who's a film director, she's just made a film for American television company on child development, and she went out to Japan, and she couldn't believe it that 4-year-olds were traveling by train by themselves. I said, well, I've got a whole film of that. We were absolutely amazed how children could travel on their own at 3 to 4. And I've got a lovely picture of a small child asking the guard something. Their language is so good, these children. They are so cognitively and linguistically developed that they are independent and can be independent in a way that you'd never see a British child coping. So we have a lot to learn from each other. We really do. And certainly, I mean, the Japanese were absolute. They had all my work translated into Japanese, and that stuff that I've just showed you, which was it was a research project on narrative called COGS. They had all that translated into Japanese, and in the last one, I'm going to show you how I would teach a lesson. Now, there's a lot to look at here. I'm going to let you read it first, and then I discuss it, because I teach where all the narrative levels are able to be represented in tasks we do, because generally I'm not like this, that a teacher in the class would talk for 2 hours. I'd talk for half an hour, and then the rest of the session would be groups doing tasks. That's how I teach. It's not kind of possible on online to do this, is it? But that's how I would teach. Now, this was a lesson I had to do for a colleague who was off sick, and I had to do it at an hour's notice. And the topic was coping with disasters. Well, I knew there was a massive amount of stuff on the web about this, because if you remember, in 2004 there was that awful tsunami in the Indian Ocean. 500,000 people, no, 250,000 people died. There is masses of really good stuff on the web, and I knew that, so I used a video, a 5-minute video of the tsunami, and we talked about personal disasters in our life, about losing money or somebody in our family dying. They all came up with different disasters, and then we looked at the film and on the web, and then I divided the class into tasks. So I'm going to ask you to read all this now, and then we'll talk about it. So I'll give you a couple of minutes, and this is your last task. You'll be glad to know. It's like how you arrange the teaching of all this. And it's very successful. I've done it over years, and I can tell you that my classes have always done really well, and because I've really concentrated on getting them to think and communicate. So I'm going to give you just a quiet time to read all that, and then we'll talk.
May I say something
Yeah,
to the group? Okay, I have been reflecting on the 7 R's, which I call the 7 R's, which you are giving to us. And just think for a second how appropriate they are in the robotic education. They're absolutely fantastic, Rosie. Because when the group get together, they produce a range of ideas. Then they arrange the ideas in a certain order in order to get what they wanted to do. Then they compare, they collaborate, they say what they want to do and what is better, what is, and you follow one side or the other. And so if you look at all of them, you can see how important they are and they fit in a group for robotic education.
Well, when I came to look at the schools in Italy, where was it 2019, I was so impressed because they were, I mean, I know Italy is a culture that values communication. I mean, that's obvious because a lot of your examinations have a very strong oral input, don't they? But the children could speak to me in English so eloquently because they are so used to communicating and doing stuff in school, aren't they?
Yeah, and then
It reminded me of Japan.
Yeah, think about when they say report, then they have to introduce, describe, and discuss what they have done.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's perfect. It seems to be studied for educational robotics.
Yeah, I mean
it's so true. What I'm saying is so applicable, it's so truthful that you cannot apply even with technology, and we know that.
Yeah, you see, if you range tasks at all the levels, and it's easy enough in lessons. I mean, I've taught across subject areas. What you're doing is you're providing the whole group with opportunities to see other experience, and they're learning from each other because students learn more from each other than they do from the teacher. That was a shock to me when I was a psychology student and we had to look at the influence, the greatest influence on learning for children, and we found it was their peers. And I was quite shocked because I thought it was the teacher. So it was an interesting thing. If you provide teaching that they can learn easily from each other,
I totally agree with you.
Best. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can see how it all goes and how you can develop quite easily tasks that will reflect the different narrative and cognitive levels. Not every lesson would you want to do this, but certainly on a regular basis you would need teaching that takes students through the narrative levels. I do it with postgraduate students, always getting them to make presentations, so they're getting that experience. Now, the last slide is really one of just bringing together some of the messages, really. Recent research I read said 75% of children and adults have limited thinking and communication. Do you think that's shocking? I found it very shocking. This was American research who are really lambing into this now because they are finding that e-learning has really revealed a lot of learning difficulties of people, and therefore they've been examining it in research. So I do think this is an area that we need to take seriously, reflect on, and see how we can manage the best we can as teachers. Very, very important when you're presenting information is to give an overview, a structure, and a final review, and add stories to the presentation, so that is the best structure to really cope with all the different learning styles. Give people time to look at the visuals, and try to break up talk with tasks. And as Riccardo is just telling us about the schools in Italy, there is a lot of sharing of knowledge that goes in the robotic classes that I've looked at with Riccardo. Really impressive stuff. So there are hugely good models around that we can latch onto. I've seen massively good models I've worked in Cuba, wonderful stuff going on there. Latvia, well, most of the countries in Europe I've been involved in projects, and there are some really good things going on. So we learn from each other. And can I say how grateful I am to people like Stefano and his group of people who provide all these wonderful opportunities for all of us to meet together and hopefully exchange. I've written a lot of articles, and I've sent some to Stefano. He can, if you want them, I'm sure he will let
We
you.
have already uploaded them on the webpage.
That's brilliant. And I've also on the first slide put my email address, so if anyone wants to contact me and exchange, it's great. We've developed a sort of exchange now on email when people are putting up things that interest them, and it's quite interesting what comes up. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening. I think you're all marvelous.
Well, Rosemary, thank you. That was really lovely, very, very interesting. It's exactly what we are experimenting and what we are trying to demonstrate scientifically. What you mentioned is exactly what we are experimenting together: Lithuania, Turkey, Gazi University, Spain, Castilla y León with Mario Blanco, and us. And we are using robots, 3-4 years old, 5-6 years old, and having activities without robots and with other robots to see the emotion, the communication, and how it moves. And the results are amazing. Indeed. We are writing a white book for the European Commission about it. We will send it to you, indeed.
I'd love to see it, because I really admire what you've done. I mean, what you're doing, and I've read a lot of your stuff on the web. And of course, Riccardo, who I've known for years, I met Riccardo when she was a senior research fellow at Cambridge University, and she came to do a course that I ran in London called Human Communication. And I thought, what's a professor from Cambridge coming to do a course? But we became very great friends because we saw that we had masses in common, and we were both passionate about education. And I've learned a lot from Riccardo, and she's told me a lot about the
I learned a lot from you, Rosie.
Oh yeah, because we learn from each other, don't we? We only
It's lovely.
learn through sharing. And I've had some wonderful experiences in Italy. And I did the robotics education course with Riccardo there. And it's just such a joy, because there's so many people who are passionate about education, but it is the most important thing for the progression of the world, isn't it? We have to get it right. Teachers don't always have good feedback, but they are the most important profession for society, and they should be proud of what they're doing. And I've met many wonderful teachers, and what they've given to the world is immeasurable, and what you're all doing is fantastic. So thanks for letting me be involved. I'm meeting you all.
No,
I can't see you, and it's sad.
Rosemary, we are going to involve you more and more. Don't worry. Everyone, yes. And just to give you an example, already 700 people have been downloading your articles.
Oh, have they? Well, I hope you go now and enjoy a lovely glass of wine and a nice relaxed evening, because listening for 2 hours and looking, gosh, it takes up all your concentration, doesn't it?
Okay, stop sharing your screen, please, and let the people say how much they thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rosie. We'll talk later on. Bye-bye.
Thank
you. Bye, everybody.
So, please say to Rosie how wonderful she has been today. Reda.
Perfect today.
Thank you, Rosemary, for inviting us to listen to such an informative thing, and your nice English language. We miss it very much.
Oh, you've made me feel better. That's lovely. It's lovely meeting you all, and to see you smiling. It's great. Yeah, lovely.
Now, Laura, you have met a wonderful lady, a wonderful professor. Try to imagine to be her students.
Yeah, I think that's one of the wonderful things about being a teacher, isn't it? And you and your students. Well, I'm old now, but I still have contact with students of years and years ago, and it's wonderful to see what they do with what you've given them. Really, yeah, and it's very encouraging.
Yes, I think we are lucky to be teachers because we have such wonderful students most of the time. Yes.
Yeah, you're
and
right.
we learn. Yeah, we can learn a lot from them.
It's a privilege, isn't it?
Yes,
it's
it is.
A real privilege. Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
And everyone's different, and everyone has knowledge that you don't have. So it's really, really important to connect up and share.
Rosemary, we have set up a world community network called Nobody Less about pro-social values, and we don't have we got the representative from Scotland, but none from UK. We would like to have you join us.
My son is an expert on that.
Yeah, we would like you to join us. We would like to have you to join us in this network.
Yeah, wonderful. And could I get my son involved?
Absolutely, anyone you want.
He led the Nuffield. I don't know whether you came across the Nuffield research on motivation across all the age groups. Really interesting research, and his lovely team. In fact, his lovely team came from all over Europe, Bulgaria, and this sort of thing.
That's lovely. Yeah. I write the website here in the chat.
Okay. Hang on.
Have a look.
The dog is moaning at me now.
And we will be in contact, I'm sure.
Yeah.
In touch.
Lovely. Yeah.
So, say thank you to this wonderful lady, teenager lady. You have such a strong energy. We would like to be like you.
Well, you are.
No, indeed. You're amazing. Mariam, do you want to say something?
Yes, I was thinking exactly that is not only the topic you talk about, but the way you do, because I enjoy the happiness you talk with, and also because we are very privileged to be working with children, and I like this mood of spreading happiness, because I think childhood should be the happiest stage in life, because it's the first one. So all the rest is on that age, and I like very much that way of expressing and that way of explaining and that way of spreading your knowledge and sharing your knowledge with all of us. I like it very much. The topic, of course. I also read the book Stefano Show. I also have it, and
yes.
but the way you spread, the way you explain is wonderful. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
2 hours were really short.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, I've been very privileged to work with lots of really good people like Ricardo, and now I've got to know Stefano, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? And it gives you energy, and it gives you a real zest for life. Your contacts with others, it's the contacts, the communication.
Rosie, Marian Blanco is also collaborating with Robotics versus Bullying project, which is mentioned inside this book.
Ah, yeah. You
She's
see,
also
we're very lucky in that book. It was through Ricardo. We got Professor Fagin. I'm sure you've heard of him. You know, he is the big genius of the world, isn't he? Because he invented the microchip and the screen. He is one of the world's genius, and he wrote the first chapter of that book.
Yeah,
really special, and that was all due to Ricardo. I mean, the book is definitely a collaboration between us both, and it couldn't have been written without all your robotic stuff from Italy. I didn't know you at the time, Stefano, but
I know.
we've got you on another book anyway. But, we would have got you in, but I didn't know you at the time, and I don't think Ricardo did she?
Ricardo did.
Ricardo did she?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think she was getting to know you, wasn't she, at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's had a long period working in America, England, and then America, and across the world. So she's coming back to Italy now. You're lucky to have her. Yeah, she's got a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience.
I know.
I've learned a lot from her. Yeah.
So,
and this is what it's all about.
Rosie, thank you again, and we will be in contact. I will invite you more times to be with us.
Well,
Indeed.
it would be lovely to meet you all again. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for being surviving, as Rosie would say, surviving up to now, but enjoying this moment. Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah.
And see you tomorrow. See you. We got a meeting tomorrow about robotics versus bullying. Indeed, tomorrow afternoon.
Gosh,
another one.
Well,
every evening.
And have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Bye.